Hi, there's some new faces here. The Finance Committee is called to order at 9:40. I apologize for being tardy. All members are present, that being Alderwoman Finlayson to my right and Alderwoman O'Neill to my left. At this time, I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda, if it is.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda as written.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All righty.
Aye.
Sorry. Do we have minutes?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the minutes from the April 26th meeting.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All righty. Thank you, Caitlin. We have no legislation. What we've elected to do, we slated today for some overflow presentations as we review our notes from the last couple of weeks, so we appreciate your attendance this morning. Generally speaking, the city has a lot of community outreach and services, and we just want to make sure that it's, of course, optimized and allocated to the right departments. And you are a newly developed department, so it's that much more important that we understand your mission and your objectives and your goals in the short term and the long term, so that we can coordinate that with what they're doing in the mayor's office and what the city is doing as far as what we're allocating for grants to community organizations. And that's why it's very ideal that Erin is here as well. So does that make sense?
Yes.
And we have a guest.
Ash.
Oh, that's Ash. Hi, Ash. Camera on Ash. So,
Madam Chair, may I ask where we can find their documents? They're not a separate department. So is it all under the city manager's office?
it should be.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Katie Conley, Budget Manager. You're going to look starting on page 44.
Okay.
On page 41, you said?
44 in the budget book. And then that's the whole city manager section. Specifically, OCS is starting on page 49.
Interesting, though. Where is it? Okay, it is in the org chart on page 44, Alderwoman Finlayson, which is a good thing, under city manager.
I'm looking for the specific, are there performance measures? I see the breakdown of accomplishments. I'm looking for goals. Are there separate goals, or are they incorporated into the city manager's goals?
I guess that's a question for whoever prepared the budget. Who did prepare? Hi there. Yes, city manager.
You can mention what was prepared. Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, Vicki Buckland, Assistant City Manager. There are goals that were included within the city manager's presentation last week. When in terms of looking for performance measures, that is not in the budget book. That is something that Laura and I have had some conversations with and about, and something that then we will be working on for this next year as part of long range goals. Part of what you see in the goals here is long range planning, which would include that.
Thank you. Can you point out or highlight those goals on, I guess it's pages 46 and 47, so that we will know, or are any of them, I mean, these are performance measures from the city manager's office. I'm just trying to do a
Those look like they're all environmental.
It was, not in the budget book, but within the city manager presentation materials
Okay.
from last week. And we can resend that if that would be helpful.
What's that, Alderman O'Neill?
We have that on the drive.
We have their presentation. You know, just for structure, let's start with this. And I think you'll agree. Let's start with staffing. We did get, and I hope you all inserted the revised staffing sheet,
Yes.
revised April 26th.
Yes.
Okay. And
So you're saying that page 48 was replaced with
Yeah.
the new 48?
yeah, Kate,
Ms. Conley?
yeah, she put that on your dais.
Yes, ma'am.
It wouldn't be in that folder because I just took that out of my desk.
They look
Is
at-
this
yes,
it
that's
right
it.
here? All the
Yes.
revised sheets?
All
Okay.
all the revised staffing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I pulled up everything.
Okay, so
I
it's.
do apologize. I have not,
No, we know, we
Okay.
definitely understand. All right, so we have a revised staffing sheet for the city manager's office as well as others, but let's focus on the city manager's office. And actually, page 49 wasn't, I'm a little confused now.
48 in the new one. Ms. Conley, I hate to nitpick about this, but could I get a copy of these that are single-sided? Because I try to put them in their respective departments in my binder. Okay, appreciate it.
Okay, so if we look at page 48, the revised sheet, and we have the city manager, assistant city manager, deputy city manager, admin, development event specialist, that's Felicia, environmental program
Is that
coordinator.
Racine?
Yes.
Yeah, that's Racine, I have my notes from before. And then we have the social worker care coordinator, and that is Erin. Community engagement administrator is Laura. Okay, so this is revised. So Erin, Laura. And then we have admin assistant for community services.
Is
Under,
that a vacant position?
well, that's what it was revised
Good morning.
for, to show it as a contract.
So we have filled that position with Ms.,
What? What's that?
okay.
So,
She's here.
if I may,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
apologize for my voice, Laura Gutierrez, OCS manager. We did do a presentation where we pulled together the information just for OCS, if that's helpful, and you can see that. So if you want to pull that
Yeah.
up, it might be helpful to.
So we should let you
organize.
do your presentation, and then we'll get all this information. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
If you would like to hear, we have it.
Yeah, why
that's all
don't,
good.
yeah, why don't you introduce who's here?
So in the spirit of, as you know, our office is fairly new, we invited our whole team out today, and we would like for them to present themselves, starting with Ms. Erin Lee.
Hi, good morning. I'm Erin Lee, the Social Work Care Coordinator with the Office of Community Services.
Hello, I'm Marsha Clark. I am the community coordinator with OCS.
I'm sorry. I'm listening, trying to listen, and
Fine.
they're going to need to come over. You have a presentation to go on?
Yes. Please
Madeline
send it
needs
to
to come over here, so we're going to have to give her a couple of minutes. That's what I'm hearing in this ear.
Okay.
So if we want it up here and to be televised, she's got to come over. So you can continue your introductions, but she needs to know she needs.
Okay, they can keep introducing themselves, and she's gonna
Yeah.
pick it up by the time you finish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we can
Okay.
reconcile
All
with
right.
the staff
Good morning
summary.
again.
Yeah.
So Ron Shea just is joining us May 8th. So she hasn't officially started, but we did ask her to join us so you guys can meet her.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Ismenia Bolívar y soy navegador hispano en la Oficina de Servicios Comunitarios.
Her name is Imenia Lee. She's the Hispanic navigator in OCS.
And her name is, I'm sorry.
Ismenia Bolívar. Sorry, my voice. Tu nombre de vuelta.
Ismenia Bolívar.
Ismenia.
Did you get that, Kate? No?
I'm gonna get it.
We'll get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
We'll
text it to you.
Okay.
All right. And then,
Hi, I'm Jada, and I'm the rental assistant intern with OCS.
So that's not listed.
so is that, so far, so good, just bear with us, okay? So we have Laura, then we have the admin assistant, welcome, and then we have the Hispanic outreach navigator, welcome. And then we have listed on the staff summary, our community service coordinator, is that the intern?
No.
That is
It's the last item.
our community services coordinator is Ranche.
Hold on,
Sorry, we have it listed as the admin.
The last one, community services coordinator. Whose title is that?
That is Ranche Clark.
Okay, so,
who is the admin assistant for community services?
That's actually that position formally is known as an admin assistant, and then they changed it.
We have it listed twice. I'm sorry you're not looking at, we're looking at the budget book, and
I don't know.
we have 6 positions in your department. 1, 2, 3, 5.
well, if the community services coordinator is listed twice, I'm not seeing
Yeah, I'm just,
where it's listed twice, though.
well, after Laura, we have the admin assistant for community services.
And that's the one she just said she changed to something else?
Well, then 2 down, we have the community service coordinator. So which is which? I'm asking.
So we have 4 positions
Okay, so
and
something's
2
listed twice.
interns. 2 interns through the internship program with one-time funds. One of them is Jada, who next year, if there are internship funds, we would love to have her continue.
Okay,
So there's no longer the administrative assistant for community services.
So we never had an administrative assistant, to my knowledge. We always had the community services coordinator, and that was that position, the administrative assistant. But the contracts were always signed as coordinator, and so we continued that.
Hispanic community social.
Madam Chair, can you see what was changed, or maybe Ms. Conley can tell us? Because we have one more on the new sheet than we had on the old sheet.
Okay,
Are you looking at the additional administrative assistant that's shared between the city manager's office and the mayor's office? Because that's the net new position for
Yeah.
FY '24 within the city manager's office.
that would be called administrative assistant, and that's up above.
Okay.
Okay, so we need to relook at this. It adds position twice, I think is what I'm seeing. You clearly have 4 positions, which is the social worker care coordinator on the left, which is Erin, community services coordinator.
So who is that person?
That says here under
That will be
contract.
Miss Ranche Clark. Ranche, I'm so sorry about my voice.
Okay. Ranchi, what's your last name?
Clark.
Clark.
Okay. is
Thank
she-
you. I like to call people by their first
I know,
name,
we're
Ms.
sort
Clark.
of, I don't mean to be rude.
Okay.
Are you under contract?
Yes, she will be contract. So she starts next week.
Yeah, Kate, Kate was given this information, so I don't want to put her, so she's only, you're trying
Yeah,
to figure this out.
I'm trying to reconcile with what we have.
Yeah.
So I have on the staffing summary, a social care coordinator, a community engagement administrator, which I don't see up there, right?
Oh, so that's the manager. That's me.
All right, what I want to do is please, okay? Caitlin, could you make them a copy of this sheet? Or I'll just give you mine.
Madam Chair, can we let them do their presentation? Maybe this will come out in.
I really think we need to reconcile this now. This is what's in the budget book. This is what we're looking at.
Okay.
Okay, so we're just trying to put names against those titles. And below, here.
This is,
And now you can talk with us.
okay. So I see the one you're talking about. Social worker care coordinator is Erin Lee. Community engagement administrator, that's me. Laura Gutierrez. And then Hispanic outreach navigator, Ismenia, Ismenia Bolivar, Bolivar. And community service coordinator is Ronche Clark. So there does say administrative assistant for community services additionally. And the way that it was explained to me was that these were the administrative assistant for community services and community service coordinator were one and the same. So now they're split here, is what I'm seeing.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? And maybe it's to the city manager, maybe it's to the finance team. Is this position included in the budget?
Which position?
So there's an assistant position for community services and a community service coordinator, and that, the way that it had been working was the same position, and now it's split.
Split or duplicated?
Or
Listed
duplicated.
twice, yeah.
Well, I'm
They're
asking
different.
if it's a new position or a position that has been included in the budget.
Who
So-
did the
so-
budget? Who did the budget? I mean, this,
Finance Department.
no, I know, but the staffing.
I can get the information for you. I don't know without looking. So I'll get the information and see what titles are in there that we base the budget on.
I mean, I guess my question was, who gives you the staffing summary? You get that from?
The finance office prepares that table, the staffing summary, based on the information in both Munis staffing and our work with the departments. It is my understanding that there are no net new, besides these interns, there are no net new employees in that office this year. That the new administrative assistant that we've added is in the office of city manager.
Up above.
Which is the to be determined, yeah.
But I would ask that you allow Katie some time to reconcile it, to make sure we're giving you the right answer.
I don't have the,
Thank you.
So it's still to be determined.
yeah, that.
There was a grant.
Madam Chair, there is a position, Ms. Bolivar's position, Hispanic case manager, navigator, that had been grant funded. We have not heard back about the grant as of yet. And that's been brought to our attention by Ms. Laura. So that one's hanging in the balance.
So what we're hearing is that there's no, there's 4 positions and 2 interns, and the 2 interns are the added positions from one-time funds, and they're in the budget. Okay.
But I'd like that clarified. They are in the 24 budget.
Yeah, one-time funds used.
I see that
If I may,
on there, but
the
it says
internship
one-time
program
funds
is from
in
one-time
23,
funds from
not 24.
FY '23.
I'm
So
sorry.
last year, this
Right.
current fiscal year. And my understanding is that the internship program has been presented again. So we are hopeful that our interns might be able to continue through that program.
So currently, what's on the chart
Yep.
goes
So
away on June 30th.
This would be next year. And we have
It's
requested.
magic. It just changed to 24, didn't
Oh,
it?
did you see that?
I did. That's why I said it's magic.
So we have requested the Hispanic case manager be funded through the city this year.
Okay, so there again, the question is it or isn't it? Funded or not funded?
Take this back, because are you okay?
Sorry.
Questionable.
No, I'm sorry.
Grant requests made and waiting for the outcome.
Yeah, the
Okay.
intention is to fund that, continue to fund that with a grant that's been requested. If that grant, like any of the other city grants, does not end up materializing, then obviously there's a discussion that follows. But the intention is to do the same thing with that.
So maybe,
ask how
Madam
much
Chair, I would like to hear their presentation, and then, because I'd like to know what we're talking about with the amount of funding that we may or may not have, may or may be able to find.
And
Alderwoman.
likewise, the internship programs are pending the passage in the budget of the internship program,
Okay.
but they're not
so-
separately funded.
So if the internship program is funded, then if needed, these two positions will also be funded. Got it. Thank you. That was a long way around to get to that answer, wasn't it?
I have a question about that.
Yeah, I do too.
So-
Go ahead. You, go ahead. I think it's the same
Sorry.
question.
So I have a question about that because last year's internship program was a specified 6 weeks, I
Correct.
believe.
And
with a
that,
certain-
excuse me. I think I know where you're headed, and
Right.
I don't have a good answer for that because it was a shorter program, but certain internships, as we've seen through the budget process, have been extended.
And
the
how did
question
we
will be
extend those? How did we pay
through
for
budget
those?
transfers, through various existing funds within the internship program and elsewhere in the budget. So we'd have to come back to you and extend them.
So can we get an overall cost of those interns that we extended past the
Yeah, we need
6
all the
weeks?
additional.
How many interns were extended? I believe, I know of at least 4.
I think we're talking different intern programs.
Okay.
the
Yeah.
In the FY '23 intern program, the money that was allotted was $200,000, and as you know, we gave 90, I think 90 or 95 to the county. Then the rest of it, the 105, was used for our intern program. And it lasted longer than just the summer. There were several interns that were carried into the fall. And as of December, there was 4 or 5 interns still working to use up the rest of those funds. And I think it was April, sometime in April, the funds were going to run out. And so at that time, the departments who had interns, which I know OCS was one of them, there was only 1 or 2. If they wanted to keep them, they found extra funding by transferring it from somewhere else in their budget.
I thought Director Hopkins was carrying all of the intern money for fiscal year 2024.
24, not 23.
Okay.
In 23, it was in the mayor's office budget,
Okay, so that's a good thing, that it's all in one place, but there's nothing.
but for 24, it is in
I just wanted
HR's
to-
budget, and we've provided, I think it's somewhere near $90,000.
Right.
For that to continue, and that will fund whatever interns we decide fit the program. So I think they're hoping that their 2 interns will be 2 of those.
And those will be funded for an entire year, 12-month.
I can't say that for sure. I don't know how many they're planning to do in the summer versus how many they're carrying all year long. I don't think we know that answer yet.
But these 2 have been funded since July
Yes,
and are planned to be funded through June 30?
as of now, yes.
Okay. Can we get an analysis of that cost so that we can determine for 24
Whether
if
or
the
not
94 is going to cover year-round interns?
we can. I think the intern program is going to be organized a little differently this year, so we may not have as many participants. It'll more heavily depend on department need instead of, I think we took almost everybody that applied last year. And it's my understanding that they're going to try to target the departments, making sure they have a slot for somebody to actually work.
Which makes sense.
Yes.
There was a lot of interns sitting around the water cooler.
Yes.
But these are year-long interns versus summer interns, correct?
I think they started as a summer intern, and they did such great work that they want them to stay, and they have a lot of work to do. So their summer interns extended to all year because we had the extra funding.
So let's go back to the grant that paid for them last year.
It wasn't a grant, it was
It
one-time
wasn't a
funds.
grant. So what was the grant? I have a grant in Office of Community Service.
The Hispanic liaison, what's it called,
Yeah.
case navigator, case manager?
Yeah.
That is the one that's been grant funded. We've applied for the grant, hoping to get it. If not, they would like to keep that person.
Who is that person?
Ismenia.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so that, do you see where I'm talking here?
She's one of the four up here.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, okay, Alderwoman Finlayson.
The council approved funding for a intern program that Alderman Gay coordinated. Am I correct?
Summer.
The funding came directly out of, well, our budget, but that program paid $25 an hour. We had this discussion in part with the HR director the other day.
If I understand, some of them were paid $20 an hour, some of them were paid $25 an hour.
Okay. Are the interns in this department being paid according to Alderman Gay's program or a different program?
So that's information I'm going, as far as I know, the rate would be the same, but I'll have to look it up because I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, we'll.
Okay. There is no question, and this is editorializing on my part, that the interns that we have in OCS need to remain, and we need to figure out, because they've already filled a greatly needed void. And so we need to figure out how to make this work through 24 and on a more permanent basis if we can.
That's why I asked
Okay,
for the cost
we have
analysis.
talked about expanding this department, and we're growing, the seams are bursting. So this is our opportunity to do that. So, Madam Chair, I would ask that we allow Ms. Gutierrez to do her presentation now.
Yeah, we have Trish, we have Director Hopkins coming in today, I believe. Is she coming in? And we'll ask her to find the internship, the $90,000, where that comes from and whether it's just summer interns. But the objective here is to keep you going at least 2024, at least. So, okay then, I think we have it straight. So thank you. You can continue. Are you okay, Ms. Connolly, on everything? Okay.
All right. So one of the things that we were tasked with this year was, as we start to build out our office, to do a strategic planning. So we had a day in which all of our team got together and we spent a lot of time discussing what our values were. I think we had like a sheet full of different words or more. And then we have cut it down to these specifically that we felt encompassed everything that we really value as an office. So the values that we have are advocacy, commitment, empathy, empowerment, trust, inclusion, education, and equity. And that our vision from that stems to foster healthier, safer, empowered, and thriving communities in Annapolis. And our mission is to connect, provide services, empower, and advocate for the well-being of Annapolis residents by addressing social drivers of health. So thinking that somebody's well-being and that their ability to be healthy is really driven by their social factors in their communities, and we want to make sure we're working on those from the Office of Community Services. This was just a filler for you guys to have some color.
That's fine.
Our highlights, I think, were already discussed, but if you had any questions about anything in particular, we had 2 grant programs this year that were one-time funds, the Adopt a Community grants and the Children and Family Success grants. At the same time, we also established all our workflows and worked to become a part of the Munis system and finance. And so we were in the middle trying to pull those things together as well. And we started the rental assistance program, which also has energy assistance and security deposits. And that was launched in January of this year. As well as having done case management for at least 200 families. And since January, our rental assistance, we've had at least 139 cases. So those are the main highlights to share. I don't know if you have more questions about the grants programs, we can come back to that. And we wanted to have some highlights of the rental assistance, which was asked of us. So just sort of applicants, right now we have already spent about $160,000, and that might have gone up in the past week or so. Jada has that exact detail right now. About 75% of our applicants are self-identifying as Black or African American. About 10% are self-identifying as Caucasian, and about 13% as Hispanic. And there's a smaller group that I self-identify as other. A little bit less than half aren't up to date with their utility bills. So we just wanted to share that, but 100% would like to continue connected to our office. Every single person applying has asked for us to continue correspondence with them. Do you want to take that over? Okay.
All right, hi, I'd like to talk a little bit about our case management / service coordination services. So referrals for assistance are typically received either from the mayor's office, social service organizations, local schools, or just the resident directly contacting our office. And the case management services that I do provide for the community is just a method of providing services where myself as a professional social worker would assess the needs of the client, make arrangements, coordinates, monitors, evaluates, and advocates for a package of multiple services to meet the client's specific needs. And, most clients that I do receive referrals for will typically need about 3 months of case management services. If that happens to go, I would say maybe over 6 months, 9 months, up to a year, then we would look at referrals, maybe to either social services, adult protective services, or any other nonprofits that offer long-term care. And also another resource I do provide is also service coordination. And this is simply, say, for example, someone may call and they need the number to Community Action Agency. And that's really all they needed. And that would be that right there. And it's just the process of service planning that provides individualized services and supports to families.
So I know how there has been questions on Hispanic engagement and the community services coordinator position and our Hispanic navigator, so I just felt we should take the opportunity to clarify a bit. Just a sort of background is that currently we have about a quarter of our population of Annapolis as Hispanic, and we did a survey with our Take Care team where we surveyed around 800 Latinos, and 82% of them did not speak English. So it's critical for us to have the ability to have folks that speak Spanish to provide services to those people. Thus, we created this position of Hispanic case manager, case navigator, because although we have an amazing social worker, we do need people who can speak Spanish and connect those services. So they work in tandem really well. They work in tandem as well really well with our rental assistance program so that folks know about the programs and are able to apply and get services through our case navigator. So I just wanted to share that piece. On the advocacy side, engagement, we do festivals. We have the Latino Social Justice Forum. We organize all the city doc fiestas, Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations. We have a monthly stakeholders group that meets, and we, as the city of Annapolis, lead those meetings, and we've been doing that since 2020. And we have been building in grants programs through which we have been able to continue to hire a case manager for Spanish speakers in the city. And of course, there's a lot of relationship building through that as well. So I don't know if you have any questions specific to that. We can come back to it. In terms of our next fiscal year's goals for fiscal year 2024, I think we also have covered this through the city manager's presentation, but one of our goals is to increase accessibility and awareness of services, and not just among our community members, but also our nonprofits. We're also reaching people that we might not be reaching, that we can enhance community engagement and participation, that we can improve our own organizational efficiency and effectiveness. We need to streamline our case management and our grants management programs. Currently, we have 3 this year, and we are going to continue with the community grants administration of all of those grants as well. So depending on the number of grants that we have to manage, it becomes a lot of administrative work. We want to develop a 5-year OCS plan with long-term goals with the support of their assistant city manager, and enhance our staff capacity and knowledge. We believe that training and education, not just for our community, but for our team, is really important. And to be able to find increased funding and resources for OCS to better serve the community, be it through grant programming, through city programming, through state possibilities. So in terms of sort of more long-term planning, you guys remember when you started this office, the first position hired was a social work care coordinator with Erin Lee, right? And then later we brought in the community service coordinator position. This year I've joined, and now we've been able to double that team through our one-time grant funding, through our one-time funding through grant funding as well. At one point, we had a massive team with the Take Care. We were like 12 people. So we have been growing. It's, ebbs and flows, as everything does in any institution. And as we're looking forward now, we want to remember exactly what those roots were, but also remember what the current programs that are asked of us and are required of us are. So maybe at the beginning we weren't looking at managing grants, or we weren't looking at doing rental assistance. Now that is part of our portfolio, so we want to be able to change and adapt to that, as well as to the current community context, because that is something that always changes, right? And the priorities and what the urgency is in a community is always going to change day to day. And so we want to make sure that we are also aware and focused on that, and seeing that as we're considering our long-term planning. Things that we have been talking about, we just wanted to sort of throw it out there, but we really do admire the Cricket-style organization that the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families in our county uses. It's family-centered. You bring everybody to the table, and it works so well for those families to get those services, and we would love to think about how we could implement that in our office for city residents. To expand on staffing, case management, thinking of pilot advisory groups. There's a lot of ideas in our team. We have a waterfall list of projects we want to do, and we just are more at the point of trying to pace ourselves to not get too excited, because there's so much great work that can be done and that needs to be done. But again, we know that we have to plan this and be organized to do it well. Next. So our budget request is pretty much, I wanted to make sure you understood that there isn't exactly a decrease here, even though it looks like it. There's a difference because in one-time funding in our last fiscal year, we had $450,000 in grant programs. This year, we don't. So that's why the number goes down so dramatically. So I just wanted to point that out. In terms of enhancements, we have asked to increase the homeless services grant by $5,000 to have some translation services, because a lot of departments lean on our office for translations, and it would be great to be able to have something for that. We have our temporary alternate housing emergency service fund that we have requested funds for the next fiscal year. To be able to participate in community events and activities, to have some sort of funding to be able to help the Robin Wood Easter egg hunt or to do the Halloween project at Eastport. And these things that are requested of us are backpack drives. We are always saying, unfortunately we can't participate, or we don't have funding to provide, but we'll be there. So that it would be nice to be able to support in that sense. And then the case manager position, which is the big funding piece. In terms of future planning, this is sort of long-term, just a list of things that we have, but staffing, digital management, and building out our office. And that's it. Questions?
Yeah, I don't know who raised their hand first, but Alderwoman Finlayson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I put my questions in my notes. So, I'll start from the end, which was your budget. Excuse me?
Sorry, I'm just coordinating. Okay, go ahead. Yep.
You mentioned the $450,000 that you did not get, or you don't know whether you're going to get it. And I'm on page 13. So your budget was reduced by about $400,000. Do you expect to get those funds, or are you expecting to do the same amount of outreach with half the amount of money?
So that funding was one-time funds for grant programs, which is why it's not included, because my understanding is one-time funds are.
Yes, I'll add to that. The reason that number is so large there is because of the program that you funded, and there was another program that was funded, and those two chunks of money took their budget up to that number. So that's why it goes back down, is because so far we don't have funding for those programs.
Okay, thank you. That explains a lot. Because I was going to say we should move you all to every other department if you were doing the same amount of work with half the money, but that's not the case. So, okay. Social, I'm on page 9, and my question is your short-term services. It sounds like we provide short-term services. You mentioned up to 3 months of service. And then if it's longer, 9 months or a year, you pass their need on to the county agency. Is that the plan, or that's the approach that we're taking?
Sure. So typically, if I find that the client may need more intensive hand-over-hand services, then definitely I would refer them to either county or state social services, just because that they have, I would say, more social workers there, but they also have more intensive programs to provide that support. And these are typically folks where they call in, they may have several issues, and some of these issues, it may take, I would say, much more than 3 months to properly address and then properly follow up with as well. So that's when I usually call my colleagues in from the county and the state to either get their advice, see how they would normally like to do a referral. And we also do referrals to systems of care with the county, to the Cricket board as well, in order to get that more intense intervention.
So clearly you must have already developed a relationship with those county and state agencies to be able to pass on our resident.
Yes, and I've just been so happy to build that relationship with them, along with our team. A part of that relationship is meeting with county resources at least once a month. We also have other meetings as well that go on, with systems of care. And so that we are a recognized organization in that ecosystem of helping our families.
Thank you. Tell me about your relationship with the Community Action Agency. I know there was an effort to create a MOU, and Mr. Malinoff, that's something that I think Ms. Gutierrez is still wanting to pursue. It was in the law department, I guess, when last we spoke about it.
So I can clarify on that quickly. So the Community Action Agency, when we were starting, Mr. Simmons was actually in charge of trying to get an MOU started between OCS and Community Action Agency. When it was taken to the Office of Law, they told us that in this case, an MOU was sort of an extreme formality that wasn't necessary, that we could just do a partnership letter. And so they rejected the MOU at that point.
Tell me about the services that you're partnering with, is what I guess I'm...
Oh, sure. So a part of that is our referrals. So say, for example, we may receive a call from a resident needing energy assistance. From right now, Community Action Agency has a contract with BGE in order to provide energy assistance to residents in need if they have a cutoff notice, if they may be behind and unable to keep up with their bills. So we refer them to those services. I know in the past, they did help out with rental assistance as well. That was something, and I also received training from Community Action Agency as well. They were nice enough to help out with that.
Thank you. What about OIC? On page 10, you refer to Hispanic language access. Is that something OIC helps with? I mean, do you have
So
a
OIC
similar
does more
relationship?
workforce development and GED classes online, and they're great for getting folks connected to that. We definitely refer people to those programs. The community college also has a lot of classes now, and we try to work pulling community members into those classes. The language access plan, the group that I mostly get support on for that is the county. They have an amazing team right now working on a language access plan, and so I've had conversations about that, and I've learned a lot about their program. But it's something that we are still looking and exploring. I know that there was funding for an evaluation of language access in our city that was sponsored by Mark Rodriguez when he was here. And then I think that's just the last that report was created. And that's something that I have actually asked our city manager and want to pursue and add that into our portfolio and see if we can do something with that for next year.
Did we...
What's OIC?
What is it? Office Industrial... What's OIC stand for?
You say they get going.
Something industrial. I know.
Opportunities Industrial Corporation.
So, pardon me?
Opportunities Industrial Corporation.
Opportunities Industrial Corporation. They have been partners in the city for a long time, and they get funding through our grant program, which is kind of interesting because they're our partners also. And I'm looking now at those organizations like OIC, like the community college, like the Community Action Agency that are partners with us in any number of areas. My next question has to do with, my note was that the Adopt a Community program. Under your goals on page 11, you say to enhance community engagement and participation. Do you see the Adopt a Community group, the grant recipients, being part of that? I know they are already meeting individually, I guess, and sharing resources and looking at best practices.
So that all of our grantees, the idea ultimately is that we could engage them and pull them further into working with our office. We are starting a group right now in which we'll have meetings where we'll be discussing not only the grant programs that are being funded in the city, but also what are our priorities for our communities. And the idea, and we have sent out a letter to our community members and to leadership and organizations asking that they participate, because we believe that we're all pieces of a puzzle here, and that together we can see the big picture of what is going on in Annapolis and what we need to do to better the conditions for everybody in Annapolis. So the idea is to ultimately have everybody work together towards a better vision, and that will tie into our long-term planning. It will tie into our ability to think about how should grant funding be determined? What are the things we want to be funding? What are the things that we need to be prioritizing as we have case management? Do we need to be in a specific neighborhood with one program or in another, or with rental assistance? Those are the things that we want to have a little, if we have community support grant programs that are tying in and bringing in information, then we will have more knowledge and more data to drive our actions.
Well, I know as part of the Adopt a Community grant, we asked that the coordinators meet. I don't remember whether it was monthly or quarterly. And I don't know whether you're being invited to their meetings, but several of them are already meeting. And it's only been a month or so, or 2 months, or whatever, time flies. So anyway, where that's in the works, and I appreciate your forward thinking about how to better serve the community. So I'll stop the editorializing now. Thank you.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Thank you very much. I appreciate this detail. And please note that all of our questions are really directed at trying to get down to the bottom line. And so it's nothing that, it's not a negative on, I hope that you don't feel that way. I know that initially this morning it kind of started out like we were firing questions at you. So please note that it's all positive, and it's just trying to understand when we're looking at 17 departments and trying to make sure that the funds that we have are going in places where it's most needed, and finding out that, you know, you've got interns that have been working all year. We'd like to keep those interns, and I'm, you know, further discussing with my colleagues, like, do they remain interns? Do they, you know, go into more of a more cohesive role, and how that happens, so that we're not waiting with bated breath on June 30th to find out if you have their services the following year or not. So please note, my questions revolved around long-term planning, and I totally lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. Can you explain the CRICT style organization a little bit more?
Yeah.
So with the CRIC style organization is that was actually started with the county through via systems of care. And if they had a family that was in crisis, especially in crisis of the children being placed into foster care due to various issues and needs, this team was made up of several nonprofits, local organizations, as well as the Department of Social Services, in order to do what can be done to keep that family together and out of the foster care system. So that was originally started to help keep families together. But it's also been a great way to get different nonprofits at the table. So say, for example, you would have one nonprofit help out with food assistance. They have that role. You'd have another nonprofit to help out with parenting classes. They would take that role. And everyone would come to the table and be assigned a different role to help out with that family. And and it's also had a wonderful success record in keeping children out of the foster care system. And it's something that has been translated for young children. So there is EC, early childhood cricket. I know in Annapolis, I would love to see a version, you know, of course, for our families here, but then also for adults, and something to help with our seniors as well, because as they go through life, I've found that the needs that they experience are definitely more complex, and with the lack of a social system or a friend system, they're kind of left out there to float. But you know, with a cricket style system to help, so that we have like multiple organizations helping these individuals, I would think that would definitely produce more positive outcomes.
Thank you very much.
So I have the acronym here is CRICKET is Community Resource Initiative and Care Teams.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Community Resource Initiative.
And
care teams.
Thank you.
Listen, no, I apologize. When I go into social worker brain, I spit out these acronyms and then I forget, oh, not everybody knows them. So I have to be mindful of that.
All right. And then also on your goals, you have increased funding and resources to better serve community. When you went through the enhancements on our budget sheet, the 40,040 case manager position is not listed. Is that an enhancement that is in the budget or not in the budget?
Which one? I missed the question.
Can you bring up so the 40,000 at the end?
Oh, the case manager position?
Yes.
Sorry, I had missed the question. So that's the Hispanic case manager that we were discussing, the navigator who is grant funded currently. Those funds in June. We applied for a grant in December. We were thinking we would hear at this point, we would have known, but we still don't know. So we have that. We just keep mentioning it, hoping.
So much like we did last year with OEM, where we put a placeholder of the $70,000 because they were waiting on a grant. Have we done that for this year or not?
I'll refer to Katie, but I believe, no, we haven't, because we didn't know about the funding issue until after the budget was drafted.
Can you repeat the question? I think you referred to OCS grants, but I want to make sure.
Correct. Well, it was 40,040
In reference to the, okay. So if you, sorry, I'm going to cut you off. You're talking about the case manager position that she was just talking about, grant funded, right? So currently in the mayor's budget, we do not have OCS grants for '24. You are correct. Last year, we did put a placeholder in for OEM, just to bridge the gap there. That's at your discretion.
Okay. So it's not currently in
No, ma'am.
the budget.
That's correct.
So it'd be an unfunded enhancement at this point in time.
No, this first, the 40,040. Can we go over all of those?
Yeah. Can we actually go over that entire list, starting with the 25,000 social services grant?
Whether they're in or out of the mayor's budget.
So it's my understanding that all of the items that are in that list are in the mayor's budget. Some of them, like the 25,000, for example, is currently in the FY23 budget for 20,000, which is why it notes that it's a 5K increase, right? The case manager position at the end is the only item where it's currently grant funded. They've applied for the grant. As with all grants, the budget is a statement of intention. So the intention is to continue to fund that with grants. When we hear back, then as with any other grant, if that doesn't end up materializing, then there's a discussion to be had. Right.
Okay. And then, so everything else is included. Okay.
So I want to clarify, is the grant that they currently get, is that on that grant schedule? It is not, correct?
No, ma'am. That's correct.
Right. So just so you know, this right now, that position isn't even on the grant listing because we didn't know whether or not they were getting it or hadn't received any information about the grant from OCS. So when we developed the budget, we didn't know if it was coming in. So we were planning on bringing you a revised grants amendment to add that, anticipating the grant coming in, like we do on many other grants. But so right now, in '24, it's not on either side. And if this had gone forward, we could always come to you with an SA if we got the grant and add that back to the budget.
There must be a accounting process for that. I mean, we're not the only
So there
city
is.
that- okay, let's do that then. What is it? What is the recommended accounting process? Because there's inconsistency.
So if the department tells us we have applied for a grant.
Yep.
And this is what it is, and we've gotten it this year, we're going to apply for it. We will add it to the grants list. I think there was a delay with the response from the department and when we were putting out the budget draft. So we don't have it in either place right now. And that's the only reason, normally in our process, we would have added that to the grants listing. But I just wanted to make sure you all knew that it wasn't on the grant side right now either, and we had planned on coming back with an amendment to add it to the 24 on the grant side.
So we need to, in our report, request that that is added. Is that correct? Like we did with the 70,000.
I'm not sure. I don't know what the best way, the way they're,
I would recommend that you put it in the grants listing
right,
and
as a grant listing. right?
as a grant for 24 at the amount they're hoping to receive. And then it's up to you as to whether or not you want to, with the unknown of whether or not we're going to get the grant, put some kind of placeholder in the general fund budget, just in case it doesn't come through. But I will tell you that there are many grants in there that they've applied for that they may not yet have an answer for.
So your grant, I look at your grant schedule in the book. When I go to
32 and 33.
Thank you. When I go to page 32 and 33, I don't see any grants for this office posted for fiscal year.
That's what I'm telling you, it's not in there, so we need to at least amend to put it in the grants fund.
Put it here.
Yeah, that part was an oversight, and it was just a matter of communication between us and the department. But that needs to at least go into the grant schedule with an amendment.
So it's, okay, so it's very positive. That's perhaps how we should have done off of OEM last year, perhaps. What we would need, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but what grants do you need to continue your operations through fiscal year '24? How about if we ask it that way? Before we start, A, adding one-time expenses, or B, adding recurring expenses, let's optimize the grant listing. Do you agree, Assistant Vicki? Okay. Do you know what I'm struggling with here? If we have grants continuing, let's get those grants and make sure they're followed through with, and we'll amend the budget accordingly.
And it's also just consistent with what you do throughout the entire rest of the budget.
Okay.
Rather than, making one-off decisions, having that be the consistent position, which is, I believe, how the rest of the grants are.
Right, that's how we pull together the rest of the grant schedule.
Could we have that list from you, Vicki? I'm sorry to call you by your first name. Yeah. And Ms. Gutierrez, is that okay? Would you be able to meet your short-term objectives?
If we don't get this grant and we don't have this position available, our case management in Spanish would be basically cut.
Oh, understood, totally understood.
That's
right.
And that's the discussion.
Okay, yeah, so we'll come back if needed.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, and if we don't get the grant, we'll either, come back to you. If we know beforehand, we can always come back and do this as an amendment in June when we do our amendment day.
Sure, yeah.
Or we can do an amendment at the beginning of the year and give them funds for the following year. So it's however you prefer to do it.
The $400,000 grant, was that related to the pandemic or anything?
Are you talking about last year, the 400,000 that was in their general fund budget? That was via the amendment process. So one of those programs was through Alderman Gay. Part of it was through Alderwoman Finlayson, using one-time funds. Mm-hmm. So we say grant, but it's a combination of grants that the city gave out, as well as programs.
Mm-hmm.
We're using the same word for two different things. In the case of the 400,000 that's not in there, those were grants that the city gave out. The funding for that position is a grant that we've applied for to receive. Is that fair?
Yep.
That is accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want everybody at this table to continue. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Where to start? Is there a way to indicate in our budget those grants that we have been, that are recurring, that we can almost count on to get each year?
So how do you define almost count on?
Well, for I don't know, something arbitrary, like that we've gotten them for the last 5 years consistently, or whatever the rate might be for consistency.
So this is the instructions we give the departments when we send out our budget information. And Katie, I don't know if you can quote it any better than I can, and we say, grants that you have applied for, that you have, what's the wording you use?
It's really tricky because we're asking them in January, December, January, to estimate what they think they're going to get in '24. That's the hardest part of all of this. So what you've seen throughout the year is we'll either come to you and let you know what has been adjusted, right? Adjusted down. So let's say we estimated high on some of these grants, then we let you know, hey, it didn't come in at that dollar amount. The other things that we do, if the grant is more, or we get a grant in the next year that we didn't anticipate, we come to you with an SA. And we either increase the funding for the current grant that's shown in your budget book, or it's a brand new grant for that year.
So our instructions to them are, the grants that you expect, that you are going to apply for and you expect to get, there's a word we use, that you're relatively sure that they're going to get, but it's like that. So it's up to the department to define, yeah, these are the ones we want to go in, expecting them to start on July 1, and these ones we're really not sure about, so we're going to hold back and not put them in the budget.
I guess my
If we don't receive information from a department, we can't put information here that we don't know.
I understand that. I'm just asking if there's a way to indicate which grants that we have consistently gotten and expect nothing to change, and we'll get those grants. The Office of Emergency Management is a perfect example. We funded that department for the last almost 10 years.
Yes, there's reoccurring
with grant funding that we could rely on. So,
but the dollar amount is unknown. It changes so much every year. The actual grant, yes, we might be receiving grant money from that grantor, but programs could change. Dollar amount's definitely going to change. But I mean, I guess we can get you a listing of grantors that we've had for the last 5 years, if that.
I'm not asking for that. I'm asking if there's a way that we can, in our budgeting process, include those grants that have been pretty consistent. That's all. I do not want us to be in a position in January to have to come back and say, oh, by the way, that grant we didn't get that grant, so now we don't have funding for these positions. Because that tells me that we're more funding-based than program-based. So my interest is in making sure that we fund the programs that we want, that we need in the city. And if that's reliant upon outside grant funding, so be it. But we should have, I feel, in our budget, funding to cover the programs that we want. And if we get additional funds through external grants, we're all the better for it. But that's my way of looking at this. I want us to look at the programs we need and make sure that we have the dollars to pay for them. And if we happen to get grant money for it, we're golden. Okay, but I just don't want us to be in a position in January. You know, we're sitting pretty nicely right now as far as our finances are concerned. We weren't always in this position. And so what happens to the programs that we need when the budget gets tight? So that's go ahead, Ms. Dickinson. I'm not sure that's a question, but
but one question I have, you keep saying January. Do you mean July?
Well, it could be December, it could be May.
Oh, you mean like sometime mid-year?
Anytime during the year. I don't want to come back and say, and by the way, you didn't get funding, so your
but
interns have to go away.
Well, you know, if you want to put in some kind of earmarked money for all these grants, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars. We just don't have the funding to continue these. Further, some grant programs, if you put it in the budget and you say, we want to fund these anyways, and we're going to hope to get a grant, they may say, do you have this in your budget already? And you say, yes. And they say, then we don't think you need it. So
Well, that's the
you have
other
to
side.
present a need for an
That's the
extra,
other-
you know, for a program, a need for a program.
That's the other side of the coin. You're absolutely right. But I started this discussion with, how do we delineate those grants that we consistently receive?
They are in
Okay.
your budget book on those pages.
I know that. I'm not talking about
Oh,
it being
okay.
on paper. I'm talking about it as far, yes, exactly.
From a thought process.
Exactly.
You decide these are so important that we need to make sure we could fund them if the grant funding fell through.
Well, but I would like for us to indicate that there are some grants that we know we're going to get. And so the funding that we don't need to come up with additional funding for those positions because we know consistently we're going to get those funds. Okay, that's all I'm asking. You know, that's how I'm viewing it. The programs that are most important, we need to be able to fund them. Okay, and if it's better to not know, which I don't think is the right approach, but I'm not a finance person. I would like for us to know that we have these programs and that we have consistent funding for them. Does that mean we put them in the budget? Maybe it does. I think it does. Okay, does that increase our budget? Probably. But at the other end, when we get grant funding, then that frees up dollars. But if we're going to be program-based, then we need to fund the programs we need. If we're not, then we just need to look at the dollar amount, and that's all. So that's my request. And I'm not asking you to do anything differently. I just want you to know how I'm thinking about this. I'm probably alone in that, but it's great.
No. I agree, but I believe what I'm hearing is that we have already, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jody or Kate, that we've already drilled down to that point where we asked the departments at the beginning of the budget process, what grants have you gotten? What are you looking for? Basically, what do you think you'll get? Am I correct? So we rely on the departments.
Correct, to tell us this
to
is
tell
something that
you
we,
what those grants are. We don't have to start with a blank canvas. You know, do we have, which we wish we had, a grant, what did Gavin call them, a grant ninja, to say, hey, there's this out there, why don't we do this? But let me put my finance chair hat on here. We look pretty because we have a lot of one-time use money, not a lot, but we have a allocation of one-time use money to use, which does not include recurring expenses. We do need to minimize recurring expenses because without the ARPA money that we put towards the fiscal year 2024 money, we would have to find $2.9 million. So we have to look at that. We have to look at it that way. Let me repeat that. Without the ARPA funding, we would be short $2.9 million in recurring expenses. So it is very wise not to add recurring expenses. But to Alderwoman Finlayson's point, let's optimize the grant funding where we can and find them. So where I think what I've asked for is, and I'm looking at Laura as running this office, is what grants are we assuming we're getting to keep everybody at this table going? And we're going to amend the budget to add those in the grant schedule.
in the grant schedule first, and then if it doesn't come through, we'll have a decision to make. Now, I wanted to talk about the general concern that if we have a grant program that we expect to get funds, but we're really unsure, we ask, like you said, during budget, we say, departments, tell us what you think you're going to continue, what you think you're going to get, right?
Right.
And then the first instance where something like what you talked about happened, OEM said, we typically get this, but we're not sure we're going to get all that money next year because it sounds like they're cutting back funding.
Right.
And he came to you at budget and said, can we have an earmark in the general fund to cover that if it doesn't come through? And this is exactly what Ms. Gutierrez is telling you right now as well. We have this person I think that she assumed it was probably one of the grants, but that was a communication issue between us. But she's saying if the grant doesn't come through, this isn't a really important position for our programs. This is something we're going to want to continue. That's exactly what she's doing right now. So this would be our process to cover instances like that.
Okay, okay. And as Alderwoman O'Neill said, I apologize for our angst here, but here's and correct me if I'm wrong. I think we collectively, Alderwoman Finlayson and Alderwoman O'Neill and I, are looking at you as the nexus, if you will, the nexus of our community services. And we want to optimize this department. And it's very frustrating for us when we hear of other initiatives elsewhere, which are all well and good, but from a finance standpoint, we need to optimize resources where they're best utilized. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Am I correct?
And giving time for that to sink in, is that what your pregnant pause was?
That was what it was. Help me, thank you. That's my frustration, is that I really, and now I'm speaking from the heart, I look at you as the nexus. This is great, what you said, and this is the city management should be giddy about this, is that we have you, and then you went through the community action grants, and you're, I believe, happy with those because you know that you're going to work with them, correct? So that's all on the same page. Okay, so help us help you. Do we have what we need?
I think so.
Do we have any other questions right now?
I'm good.
Okay.
Is Rhonda have a question?
No, I do have one. Okay, here's one. Rental assistance. Okay. In Alderman Gay, hi, Alderman Gay's here. They had a sheet in their presentation on rental assistance, which was launched in January of 2023, and they committed about $160,000. Your legislation for rental assistance is different than this. Am I correct? Is that?
This is the same thing.
But we didn't pass that yet.
Yeah.
It's a state funding.
The rental stabilization legislation is 7%.
Okay. This is your state allocation. No.
Mike's not.
Mike's not. Okay. This is from the hotel tax. Okay. And so you manage that.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. That's huge too. Okay. This is all good. All right, I'm done. Anyone else? Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, congratulations on all the awesome work you all are doing. I have a question for Ms. Lee, just a snapshot for the listening audience. Give just a quick overview, 2 or 3 sentences on baby cricket and senior cricket.
Oh, sure. So I'll say baby, AKA early childhood cricket. And that is for, so when I was, my previous position, when I used to work for the Annapolis Family Support Center, we participated. And this was from birth to 3 years old. And this was all about helping, once again, families that were at risk of being separated, whether it be children in the foster care system or separation from mothers. And so this particular group would help and surround these families with a lot of different support needs, but then also to make sure that there were parenting classes so that the baby would be able to develop as planned, and then also to assist the mother or the family in general to be supportive of that child. So it's a great program that I was very fortunate to be a part of, and I'm hoping that's something that the city will be more involved with as well, with even our own version. So for senior cricket, okay, sorry. And for senior cricket, it was there to assist with our seniors here in the county. And it was just something that unfortunately I haven't had much of a chance to work with senior cricket, as most of my experience did come with the early childhood and childhood teenagers. But as my role here with the city has progressed, I've definitely been working with more seniors and getting more experience. And as I found with working with seniors is that their support system as they age tends to decline, unfortunately. And, programs like senior cricket are there to help seniors, helps them so they can age in place, and also to help them to live more fulfilled lives and age with dignity.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context about the importance of having someone with professional training engaging in programming like that. So cricket is one of the various flavors of intensive case teaming. So people, they often, come for help, not just with one thing, but with potentially many things that are sort of mutually interacting. And for a lot of people, the interventions are reasonably straightforward. You're going to provide some case management. You're going to provide some referrals. And they will sort of self-resolve. But sometimes families and individuals come in with either they're in crisis or they are going to imminently be in crisis, which is why foster care is often a place where you see models like this, because the consequences of not getting to resolution are fairly dire for the family. So part of the value that Erin brings to the table with her professional training is being able to look at a particular situation and tell the difference between those two. Is this a person who could really benefit from some case management, from referrals? What are those resources? Which resource is this family most likely to connect with well? And is this a case where potentially they're actually closer to the point of crisis and might potentially then benefit from a more intensive case teaming model? You typically don't do that with every case because they are very resource intensive, because you're bringing a whole bunch of people together to the table at the same time. And so it's not something that you typically do with every case, which is why someone who's got some training and can tell the difference who's going to benefit from that and who is more likely to self-resolve is really valuable. Is that all fair?
Thank you,
I was going to say that was a wonderful explanation. Thank you.
We have one last question. We understand that the African American liaison is in the mayor's office. Do you find that the most, how is your work coordination with that? Because I don't know how you draw the line, especially, I remember when you were working on outreach for vaccines, and, you don't want to be discriminatory, and, you reach to those that are disadvantaged, whatever. So we're asking that again, as far as the best allocation of resources, that just is that. Are there any obstacles to that organization structure?
So I'm not sure if I'm the best person to speak to this.
And I don't want to put you on the spot or anything.
There are two community engagement specialist roles, one for the African American community, one for the Hispanic community in the mayor's office. I think that's fitting. Currently, I continue to do that work for the Hispanic community and continue to fulfill the needs between me and Imenia. We work to create events and continue those activities.
Who's the one in the mayor's office?
There isn't one right now.
I thought you said you work with a counterpart in the mayor's office.
I've been doing that work with the mayor's
both.
office. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
May I follow up? Because the African American liaison and the Hispanic liaison were both in the mayor's office. It appears that the African American liaison is still in the mayor's office, and the Hispanic liaison, by virtue of Ms. Gutierrez getting the position to head this office, has now moved into this office, OCS, which in essence means that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have two titles now. Yeah, you do. I know you won't speak up, but you got both jobs. And I don't need to elaborate because you know how I feel about that. So are we placing these positions in the right place? And Ms. Vicky, you seem to have a wealth of knowledge in this area. In your history and your experiences, have you had liaisons? Are they divided? Is this the best place for them?
I think that this is an area where I'm still building my knowledge of the city. The situation that we were in my previous position was very different. And I'm not sure that that's really an apples to apples conversation. So I'm actually not going to answer that just right at the moment because I feel like I don't have a sufficient base of knowledge to answer that reasonably.
Well, and I respect that. But you were speaking with such knowledge previously. I just thought you had it all. So.
Oh yeah, no, that part I am more familiar with because that was more directly in our wheelhouse. The ins and outs of community engagement, they are very community based. And organization specific. What we were talking about before in some respects is a little bit more, what does the world of human services sort of just look like in general? And there's a little bit more apples to apples there. This one, I want to build my knowledge a bit more.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this then, in your previous experience, has there been one, and I keep using the word nexus, of community service and then they get support, if you will, from departments such as OEM, et cetera? Or are you?
So in my previous position, first of all, the county's huge, right? There's 1 million people there. That's really not the job of just one office. And so just given the sheer size of the population, that's why it's not really an apples to apples. It's just the scale is different, and so the solution looks different.
Okay, so you're still looking and studying and watching. Okay. All right, Alderwoman.
May I make one more comment?
Of course.
That's on your list of highlights. I think for the sake of our colleagues who are not here or hearing this, if you could break that down, you guys, this could be 4 or 5 pages, I know, and you've condensed them into 1 page, but give us specifics. I mean, you don't have to give me 4 or 5 pages or anything like that, but I know that you've consolidated a lot of things here, and I don't want to diminish the work that's required to do each one of these items. So if you could probably just break them out for us. No explanation needed, but just tell us what they are, and I think we can get the scope of what you do.
So the first point is about system building.
I don't want you to do it right now.
Oh, great.
No, I'm going to give you time to go back and do this and then get it to us.
Got it.
Yeah, because we'll put it in our report. We'll make sure our colleags see it.
Absolutely.
Because they diligently read our report.
Well,
I'm not being facetious, but no, that would be good to have. All right, Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Burkhead, I'm going to pick up on something you said, and I worked for the school system for a while and the county health department for a while, so you're right, the county is large and has a lot of needs. I would suspect that depending even on the town, the city, the makeup of the town, the city, will determine community engagement. I did it on both ends there. Does that make sense? It's going to be tailored to whatever jurisdiction you're talking about. Okay. So we're unique, and we always know that. But so, okay. Just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Because I watched the entire thing this morning. I was working, but I was watching. You did a fantastic job. I completely agree with almost everything the Alderwoman from Ward 4 said, and especially in regards to enhancements. I'm worried about the preservation of this office if obviously we all have an election coming up in 1.5 years and we don't know what's going to happen. And so that's concerning. I don't want to get into the details. I'll email most of my questions. Have you, and I'm sorry, I forget your name because we hadn't really had a chance to dialogue really yet. Have you had a chance to go on a community tour and really get an understanding of some of the communities you'll be serving and the need of those communities?
So this is day 11, maybe?
And she's been in budget hearings every day.
So, but I have started that, and actually, Laura and I had a very not happy accident. It just sort of worked out. We were going to be doing a tour together because Laura's an extremely good guide around the community, and it just turned out that they needed extra drivers for Food Fridays. So we combined the two and did one of those and then worked that in. There's clearly a lot more that I'm going to end up having to do. I'm already setting up some site visits with departments, and that obviously, that's the first part, but not the end part. Started, but obviously a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that. And I think that'll just be great just because the needs are obviously so different by county. You've talked about the population, but also just in regards to the wealth disparities but within the communities. And so if you see it, you'll have not that you don't have a better, you obviously have the education, but just a connection to the communities and the people. And then lastly, I agree with you also, Alderwoman Finlayson, in regards to the placement of the African-American liaison and the Hispanic liaison. Equity, there has to be equity. What it looks like, I'm not going to get into, but what it should be is equity in the positions, and pay and responsibilities, leadership. I know both roles are managing and leading individuals, and so that's just, and maybe the equity officer can look into that. So.
Okay.
May I ask, where is the equity officer? Is that in the mayor's office?
Under Hillary? Are you talking about the position under?
The new position? Isn't
The
it a new
assistant
position?
ombudsman
okay.
is in the mayor's office.
Okay.
So in the mayor's office, so the ombudsman's in the mayor's office, and thus the new equity position is in the mayor's office also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Alderman Gay, perception is everything, and I hope you perceive that we fully support this department. Yeah, okay.
I 100% do as well, and I think that they do a very, very good job. I'm pleased with everything. They've run my grant programs well, the rent program well. I love them all.
Great.
I have to editorialize a little bit more.
Okay. To offset our morning.
To offset the morning, but I agree with Alderman Gay. They took on 2 grant programs this year. In addition to their already full plates, one was Alderman Gay's and the other was mine. And so I know the pain I put them through to get my grant through. And they did it with smiles like they're doing right now. But they took on both of those programs. So I think we need to think, and the new legislation we just passed, last week, to require a staffing impact on all legislation will hopefully stop us from loading up already full plates. Okay, so that's on us as we're creating new opportunities. We can't overload our staff. I won't say the other word. So thank you.
And hopefully we won't have another tornado, but we never know. That was last fiscal year. All right, well, thank you again for all your time, and I wish you all had a chance to speak so we could get to know you, but thanks for being here, and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you, Laura.
All right,
Hope you feel better.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Is it COVID or? 2 negative COVID tests. As I say it. All right.
Bring this because I did start.
Yeah.
Can we just take a 5 minute?
Yeah, can we take a break and then a break and a break? I just want to know what we're going to do here.
Yeah, so I have to leave.
scheduling, we've asked Ms. Hopkins to come back to help us with some classification, not classification, but job descriptions and category descriptions. And that will fill up the rest of the day. We're going to adjourn at 12:30 today. Tomorrow morning at 9:30, we just have a carryover to discuss our stormwater projects with Racine quickly, and then we're going to start deliberations on our report. Fair enough? Okay. All right. So, Ms. Hopkins, I always call you Director Hopkins, is here. We have in receipt, thank you so much for responding so quickly to those job descriptions. Alderwoman Finlayson has kindly printed them out for us, so I'm going to share with her, and I'll let her lead with, unless you wanted to say something first.
I'm just a question. I know you've asked me to come, but is anybody coming from the mayor's office to also address any of the?
I think we have a clear delineation of what the roles are from a programmatic standpoint, from an objective standpoint of their office.
Okay.
Correct? Okay.
So I'm just saying I may not be able to answer all of your questions
I totally
because I'm
understand.
not, okay.
Yeah, and this is just more, in your bailiwicks. Okay.
May I? Well, I think my questions evolve around the specifics of the job descriptions. So I think that does fall into, unless, I mean, who writes the job description?
So it's collaborative generally because what you want to do is write a description that's reflective of what the duties and responsibilities are associated with a position. I do not write them from scratch. We work to know and understand what are the elements of the job and try to capture them in a description. Of course, the format is something that is, dependent upon its review dates in the style of what the rest of city government has for a job description. So the exempt service, we don't describe differently in terms of the format of a job description, but the way we create job descriptions for exempt service positions under the code is different than the process for civil service. So for civil service, they're reviewed by the Civil Service Board. For the exempt service positions, it's the human resources manager and the city manager who review the exempt service positions. And of course, if it's a department head level, those are also reviewed by city council.
I guess one of my questions has to do with the political aspect of it. Every mayor who comes in brings staff and a job description is written.
Right.
Prior to, I guess, 2 mayors back, we didn't have a city or a chief of staff in the mayor's office. We didn't have a city manager early on either, but we created that position. But the position of chief of staff, for example, was created through a political process. And so I think one of the questions is how many of our positions now were created for political purposes or for meeting a need in the community? And that's probably not a question. So that's a statement.
Respectfully, probably not a question for me.
Yeah, that's a statement. That's not a question. So I'm looking at 4 job descriptions. Community engagement administrator, community services specialist, constituent services officer, and then there's the administrative assistant. And I think none of us are really clear on how these differentiate from job description itself to pay scale.
Is it your phone?
No, my phone's right here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But it is my phone.
I just want to make sure.
It's the vibrate. The whole table vibrates when my phone rings. Just kidding. And looking at the pay grade, one's a 14, one's a 10, one's a 14, and one's a 8. Well, that's the administrative assistant. So
right.
Help us to understand what these are and where they are. guess.
So my involvement would have been initially in the creation of the position, and so if job duties have changed and quite honestly, evolutionary changes in terms of programmatic impact, programmatic focus, desires in terms of both initiating and carrying out initiatives are going to be handled at the department level. And then hopefully we go back and review and reconsider the way we've constructed the description. But as you know, sometimes you are so launched into what you're doing that you don't go back and do that in real time. And so I need to say that first and foremost because, again, I'm not the person to ask what's happening with programs, et cetera, within the mayor's office, but I would be the person to talk to when it's time to change the job descriptions and to review them, or if there's a desire to look at the pay structure to do that as well. I have included the exempt service in the scope of work for the class and comp study. I just need to say that first and foremost, because some of what may be your concerns around this, that's also a great desire to be handled within the context of that study, so the exempt service is also looked at in terms of fair assignment of compensation, good description of work, so that the way that you evaluate positions can be applied to those positions as well. And so there's more than likely work to do. And with the class and comp study, we're actually having our inaugural meeting on Wednesday with the consultants.
So the contract's been signed?
Contract's been signed.
Excellent.
I'm moving quickly. I want to let you know that. It is a priority, and it is something that I'm not going to gather any moss on. So what I just said to you is an actual consideration and expectation that was in the scope of work. So we will be addressing that. We will be looking at that. We will be probably utilizing focus groups to go out and work with departments in their area, because again, part of this is how does it hang together, you know? What are you looking like in terms of organizational structure, and then how does that translate into the way the jobs are valued within your work group, within your department, division, unit, whatever that may be. And
will we be introduced to the company?
I think we can
I
work
had made
that
that
out.
request. I had made that request previously,
Yeah.
but
So if you give us an opportunity, first and foremost, to kind of get our feet under ourselves with a consultant to lay out our scope of work with them, our deliverables, for lack of a better term, in the scope of work, I think then it'll be a more valuable exchange or presentation.
I just think it's important that they hear from the council.
Would you consider that to be like a committee of the council, so it's not the full council?
Or the finance committee.
Finance committee? Okay.
Yeah, if my colleagues would agree.
Yeah,
Finance committee
Well,
would be fine.
we can certainly bring that up with the consultants. I'm sure they have experience with that in their work history.
We're not trying to be a challenge to them.
Or
We
delay.
just want to.
Not at all. And
Delay
I
their
hope
work.
you don't take that, what you're saying to me, I take it as
Okay.
a challenge. What I take it as, information is good. You know, the more you have information that's important pieces of consideration when you're doing any kind of work, then that's less that you will overlook later. And so that, I know that's your motivation. So I'm not suggesting that it's unreasonable. I'm just trying to figure out how to get launched and get really moving very quickly. And I want you to know that, you know, part of that is identifying the areas that we want them to have particular knowledge of when they proceed with their project.
Well, thank you for that. I just want to be clear. I'm not looking at eliminating positions. My interest is in making sure there's not a duplication and that all the like resources should be in the same area as opposed to, not. And so that's my question about.
Are you saying that within the mayor's office
Yeah.
itself? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor's office, Office of Community Caring, city manager's office, the police department, because
Right,
there's
right,
one of
right.
these that speaks to APD. So, does it make sense for us to have a PIO in every department? It might, but if they're not communicating, that's not a good thing. This is by example. But that's not what I'm addressing specifically.
Sure.
And I want to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that we shouldn't have a chief of staff either. That was just the example that came to my head. But, so if Ms. Pettis
Yeah.
listening, it's not about her position at all. So-
Can I ask
But-
a question?
Yeah,
to you,
please
Margaret?
do, because I'm
No,
done.
I think, I was just gonna reframe what Alderwoman Finlayson said in my own weird way, but, I think we want, specifically with the mayor's office, I think we want to make sure that we are approving viable positions that will carry over regardless of who's mayor. Or are these positions that have been customized, if you will, for just, the short term? And I don't know if that's a fair question to ask to you. How much leeway has this job description been given? Is that a fair way of asking?
That's a better way of asking it than I did, so
Oh, I
yes.
take that as a compliment.
You should, absolutely.
Well, it's always going to be true that when administrations change, the way the executive team looks like the team closest to the highest elected official operates is going to be influenced. That's no question. People come in with their campaign expectations, they come in with their visions, their mission then gets translated. And often I have seen, because I've been working in government for a long time, I've seen that happen at the county level where I worked for a very long time. And it's the reality, right? So there may be certain level of positions that are adopted in the code, and that may not work for the vision of the incoming elected official. They may work within the confines of that. They may want to expand that. They may want to retitle, reevaluate in terms of value. All of those things can happen and do happen when there's a change in leadership. So to what degree you can assure that there's continuity in offices, especially those that are part of an elected official's direct reports, I don't know that there's something you can necessarily do other than what we have done, which is it has to be approved. You have to be identified and approved as part of the exempt service language of the code. So any position that's in the actual exempt service will be titled and have a grade assignment to it and be listed in Title III, in 3.08, 010, 020 of the city code. To that extent, it's the responsibility to create job descriptions to go along with that.
For example, do you want me to go there?
Please, go ahead, yeah.
For example, we have a community service specialist as a pay grade 10, and it says general statement of duties, plans and directs the police department's community services programs, acts as a liaison between the department and community, providing services to civic, social, business, and related groups, does related work as required.
Because we do have a position in the police department. We wanted to create it, remember when, and you've already spoken to this, when we had, initially, we had part-time positions, Alderman Kendall. It's clear that there was a great desire to serve the African-American community and the Hispanic community. So we started out with part-time positions. And then those became full-time positions, but they remained as contractual or employment agreement positions. And then they came into the exempt service because just exactly what we've already talked about, and that was part of the conversation with the Office of Community Services. Establish a need, test it out. Okay, we need more time to serve this desire to meet this mission. And then it's like, okay, now we're really committed to it. And so that's the point at which it comes into the exempt service. We already had a position in the police department of that title. It was very close in terms of responsibilities, so it made good sense to utilize that same title, utilize, the description hasn't caught up with the specifics of the position in the mayor's office. But generally and reasonably, those positions were on the same plane. I feel that both in the police department and within the mayor's office, that needs another look. And so we are committed to that. Again, we're committed to that in terms of an update, a reconsideration of grade assignment, but also doing that in the context of how does this look across the city? Are we being fair-minded in that approach? And what would be the outcome with consideration for the various places in city government that exist? I mean, that's one of the benefits of not doing things piecemeal with having a citywide study, because that would be the scope of work expected of the consultants as well.
So logically, you have a job description, and somehow you would think that those would tie into performance measures. And ironically, we don't have performance measures from those departments. Perhaps that's why, because of these sort of evolved job descriptions. So how and stop me, city manager, if I'm asking inappropriate questions. What is the evaluation criteria of these positions? Do they go to the original job description then, or do they go to just a review, informal review process or something? I mean, that's
So our performance evaluation system that we have in the city does not evaluate people by task, by individual tasks. It's not designed that way. It's an overall knowledge, it's an overall productivity, it's effective actions. It's an evaluation with consideration of the job duties assigned to the position, but it's not going through each one of your tasks that's on your official job description saying, did you do them? Did you do them well? It's not that it's ignorant of that, it's just not designed to be a checkoff list or a rating scale on each of the tasks that somebody does in our current system.
okay. And my last question was, unless I missed it, we asked for community engagement administrator at an A14. I see that you gave us community service specialist.
I gave you both. You didn't have both? I
Did
made
you
sure I
print
went
out
back
one
and
for-
printed from my attachments
Oh, maybe it's
to
at
you.
the beginning. Yes, it's at the beginning. It was the first one. Okay.
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
All right, I ran my list. I checked them off. I hope I got them all.
There was another one. Did you finish your question? There was
Yeah,
another
yeah.
one that didn't have the same setup, and I'm trying to print it out right now.
So some positions are in the old format because they hadn't been reviewed with a current,
Can you enlarge that? Is it printing?
with
It's
the
called
chief
Community
of
Services
staff
Specialist.
and representatives in the department. So you'll see there's like the community services specialist and then the special projects arts coordinator, because that last one was a conversion from an employment agreement. Those are in the format that we have from our Evergreen Solutions vendor when we did that class and comp studies. The other ones are in the Hendricks style. And so I have drafts that are in the Evergreen style. But what I did with every job description when we went through the Evergreen is that I need the feedback from the department to make sure that it's a good description based on what the person's actually doing before we officially adopt that.
Oh, I think that answers our question. So you're going back and verifying what the person's actually doing and then giving that description to the consultant?
City manager. Well, yes, we will be doing that for, what we've asked this consultant to do is not to reinvent the entire wheel, because in the interest of time, it is, we have a 5-member civil service board, only 3 positions are filled, which means in order to get through reviewing all of these all over again with the civil service board, it may not be worthwhile. So we're not throwing all of the water out of the bathtub here. What we're trying to do is go through what we've already spent considerable time and effort on and have approved the civil service board. We will review them, but we won't reinvent them. And so that's part of their charge. It's to make sure with a feedback system that we're okay. We don't have to do something that we just completed not that long ago. And then we're not going to redesign our job descriptions. We're going to make sure they're valid and appropriate. And then if there's any impact when we come through the compensation side, we'll go back and make those adjustments to the pay plan.
Do you think we'll get, I know we've asked this before, we're hoping to get that done before we approve the mayor's budget?
The entire class and comp?
Not the mayor's.
Not going to happen,
No.
just recommendations?
No, we have priorities, though.
To get some recommendations, perhaps?
Right. We made a priority of looking at the deputy level, which will also tie into the director level, so that, again, we're doing the appropriate.
All deputies and
Yes.
all directors, okay.
Yes, that is a very high priority on that.
Got it.
So
I'm not
I
clear.
can't tell you what we can do until we've actually engaged with the class and comp vendor, but we've made it really clear what our interests were, and it is on the agenda.
Well, may I ask follow-up?
Yeah, of course.
You said the deputy positions. Are you looking at all the deputy positions or the one that's in question?
All, we're trying to be evaluative of the structure of city government in this.
So we're not going to specifically focus on the one that's in question?
It is not the intent to be singularly evaluating one position. It's the intent of making sure that that position, along with others, is in the right kind of pay relationship across the board. So
I think we've already determined, that is a standout situation. It is not comparable to what's going on with others.
So it is
The
not a
fact that-
standout.
Well, for you, it may not be. I'm sorry, but for us, it is. And there has already been an evaluation of that position. Not all the others, but the one that's in question. And so I thought we were assured that that was going to be addressed this month. But now I'm hearing it's being lumped in with all the other deputy positions.
City manager?
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Malinoff, City Manager. It's our intent to make sure that that position and deputies, which have been discussed in this committee, are all done first and foremost and done before the end of the fiscal year. So we felt that one of the issues that's been coming up in that position is it's not being paid comparable to other deputy positions in the city. So we thought by doing this, that would assure that the position is funded appropriately and like the other positions. In addition, we would hope that by singling it out without this review could affect the other positions within the classification as well. If you understand, if you single one out, not going through this evaluative process, then they'll look at that one and they may still evaluate it and say it should be higher or lower, or the other ones should be higher or lower. So it's our intent to do them together and up front, and I assured that, and Tricia has assured from them that they understand. And I don't think it ends up making it any different. I think it, in fact, creates a higher likelihood that it's going to be evaluated and upgraded within the deputy situation within the city government now.
I think it's unfair to say it's being singled out. This has been something that has been overlooked for 2 years. For 2 years. And so to then lump it in with all the others, you know, I think we have a responsibility to make sure that things are fair and equitable. And when we see things that are done, I don't want to say inappropriately, but overlooked, then we have a responsibility to bring that forward. And I don't like the resistance that we're getting to fixing this wrong that has been going on, let me say again, for 2 years. The other deputies don't fit into that mold. And for us to lump it all in together diminishes what was done to this position for the last 2 years. So I would hope that you would, and we've asked this any number of times, and maybe we have to legislate it because that's on the books. You know, maybe there's some other options with the Finance Committee, but I think it's unfair to lump that one position with all the others as if they're comparable circumstances, and they are not. They are not. 2 years, and the Alderwoman has notes to support that this has been overlooked for 2 years. So where would we be if we just turned a blind eye to it? And that's what you're asking us to do. Turn a blind eye to it and let, you know, that's not right. And I don't think we should be doing that.
City Manager?
Thank you. No, that's not our intent to turn a blind eye to it and treat it differently. In fact, I think by doing it this way, it assures it to be similarly graded to other, most likely within certain parameters that they'll come up with professionally within the same groupings as the other deputies. And so I think it'll work out fine. And that's really what the intent is by doing this study. As I mentioned before, this is one of the first things that was brought to my attention when I came here. I thought we were making headway with it, but obviously not. And so I think this will work out fine. It's not meant to diminish it but I think by singling it out within this class, it'll help it. It'll help it get to where the council and the director want it to go within the class of deputies. And that's professionally how we think the best way to handle it is.
I'm not sure it has anything to do with the director's desire, even though every director should be looking out for their appropriate staff. But I assume then that we must be planning to talk about back pay when this decision is finally made, because if we've been ignored for 2 years, then how do we rectify that? And so maybe back pay is the way to do that. So if it's going to be out there on the table with everybody else, then all the circumstances have to be similarly so.
Could we get a response on that, on back pay as an option?
I don't know that when I spoke to the director when it was first brought up, and I saw that the position was being asked for enhancement of $40,000, I assumed that was what it meant. And he said, no, at that time, it isn't what it meant. I was just trying to find the difference between the salary where it would be now under a 14 and where it would be under an 18. Our belief is that there's a difficult lift to do back pay Normally what happens in these reclassifications, whether it's to a 17, which was proposed, or an 18, is it's roughly the next step up, which can be 5 or 6 or 7% higher. And that employee then would get the benefit of that and so on. It would take extraordinary steps otherwise to realize back pay. But the one thing I thought I was addressing, you can be assured the director brought it to my attention, and I spoke to the HR director numerous times about it, was trying to get the position reclassified in a grade that it should be. And I think we were close, but here we are. And I think there's not a lot more I can say about it because it was discussed earlier, and that's why we did, in part, this reclassification study, because we're very interested in making sure that all employees are treated equitably. And if you single out one or another, for whatever reasons, I think it can end up affecting entire classes, and then you open up other issues.
May I? Mr. Melanoff, this is about righting a wrong. Okay, and I guess the perception is if we don't, if we don't do anything, it'll just go away. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go away until it's fixed and fixed equitably. Okay, and if we can't figure out what back pay is, something's wrong with our system. We know what the pay scale says. We know what everybody's paychecks look like. So figuring out back pay for the last 2 years should not. We send W-2 forms to everybody indicating what they get paid a year. Okay, I know you don't like it, but sometimes we have to do things to right the wrong. That's what I'm asking for. That is all I'm asking for. And I'm not going to leave it alone until it's taken care of.
So if I understand correctly, there's really two issues. One is the back pay. The first issue is first. You're clearly aware of the issue. I think it was brought up a couple months ago. You're clearly aware of it, and it does involve a back pay possibility plus a reclassification to the level that was requested. So the reclassification to the level that was requested would be part A, and part B would be to back pay to assume that level was the last couple of years. How many years?
2 years.
2 years. Okay. But in answer to the reclassification, the equitable approach is so that another department hypothetically won't say there was some partiality involved. And is there some kind of legal issue there? Or, I think what I'm hearing is that you have to look at deputy level throughout the city, and then you're going to have a classification of a deputy director. Is that across the board, or are they going to be different for different departments?
I don't know the end result of that.
We don't know.
Until I'm meeting with Tricia, with the consultant, midweek. I've certainly been through a number of different reviews. What I know is it will create equity for that position, which is what we're looking for, and equity for the others, because when the issue did come up, there were others who then started asking questions too about their positions, or we don't have a deputy, maybe we should create one for the salary. So I think this is the equitable way to do it, and I don't think it diminishes the likelihood that there will be a reclassification for this position. It just puts it in the context of a equitable professional approach to doing it, and creates that perception with other departments.
So I'll come right over and ask this. Is there a city, I'm only asking, is there a city tool for back pay? Is there a city legal tool for back pay other than the will of the...
So I can defer some of this to Tricia. She's had more history here than I have. But if we go down the back pay route, we're going to be facing some other request for back pay. We have never, if somebody's waiting for a promotion or some kind of reclass, I don't believe I've ever said, we're going to reclass you back to the time you started doing that work. That would open up it would open up Pandora's box, and we'd have everybody in here lined up for back pay. That is not the way we do it. You're reclassed, you're studied, you're budgeted, you're in the budget, and we pay you as of the effective date of your change.
May I have to ask, this position has already been reclassified 2 years ago.
No, it was evaluated. And I don't know if it was 2 years
No,
ago it was
not.
evaluated.
It was not. It was a deputy level position, even when it was a division within the fire department. We have a deputy harbor master. We have other positions that are deputy level. So it's just important that we are looking across the city in terms
I
of
understand that.
proper naming conventions, proper responsibilities relative to the positions that they serve. All of that is what goes into evaluating positions, not just what you're titled, because if that were true, we would be making some inappropriate decisions around compensation for people with a similar title.
I'm afraid we're trying to explain away the fact that this position was reclassified, and there was an offer made, and a second offer made. So, we can't ignore those facts. We can't, we won't, okay? So if this position had not been reclassified, there would have been no need to offer a higher grade, okay? The offering that was made was not comparable to other deputies and was turned down, okay? So it's not the same. And so we shouldn't, unless we've done that with all the other deputies, and I think not, but this one's not the same. It's been treated differently. It needed to be treated differently, and it needs to be resolved.
So was it?
And it's no threat of everybody coming in here wanting to be reclassified. It's not what we're talking about.
So was it or was it not reclassified? I'm hearing two different things from.
There were two, Madam Chair, Michael Malinoff, City Manager, two different time frames. Tricia can speak to the original process. I wasn't here then. Was there?
No, there wasn't a request at the time. I don't know what 2 years you're referring to, because the evaluation of this position was just in the last.
Right, and that's the second period of time. And when it was brought to my attention by Director Simmons, and I mentioned this to the committee before, it was evaluated. And I discussed it, the result, after the HR director reviewed it. She certainly had the history of when the department was created. There was a grade arrived at, and evidently not thought of by either the individual or the director as being sufficient. There was a discussion internally during the budget process whether we proceed with that grade and others, because there were others, and believe me, there were a lot of others in MIT, Harbor Master, and other departments who were seeking upgrades too. And we said, well, here's the equitable way to do it, rather than us picking and choosing whether it's that position, because frankly, the position, the grade, if we had kept it in there, wouldn't have been what was being asked for. So we thought it would be better to do this process, make it objective, have it be done first out of the blocks, and we honestly and sincerely felt that that would be equitable to the individual and to the class, and that's why we did it.
So path forward, hypothetically, if the report comes in earlier, this deputy city manager evaluation comes in first, and you find out that it is an X grade, then that will be amended to the fiscal year 2024 budget. It will be in this budget, but not.
It would be done in time, and Ms., excuse me.
No, but that's it, though. It would be 2024 as a recurring expense, but not any retro.
And Director Dickinson has left enough funding in the budget for FY '24
I
to
forgot
be able to
about
effectuate
Right.
increases that we anticipate. So we're not just doing it and then leaving the council and the employees with having to go through additional steps that could be troubling. So that's why we did it, and that's frankly kind of the way I try to address things. I certainly was upfront and often with the discussion and very, very familiar with the creation of the department, the hiring of the director, the deputy, all of it up until this period of time when I was away and what transpired. So I certainly respect what they do and what they bring to the table. But I think professionally, this is the right way to go, and will turn out to be equitable and fair. And that's what we recommend.
We have some other options that we can talk about, but
I have some other questions.
Okay. Alderwoman O'Neill.
Thank you. I believe that I have 3 questions, and maybe they'll morph into more as we answer. As I suggested earlier, I would just like a discussion on different terms that we use for people that are employed by the city. I know in the previous presentation, we talked about interns that were originally hired for a specific amount of time, and we kind of converted a couple of those positions. I believe somebody has said 4 or so, where they've worked all year long, and they're providing a service to us that is definitely needed. So kind of a discussion on interns versus a contracts services versus a part-time employee versus somebody that shows up on civil service or exempt. Can you just talk to that a little bit for me?
Sure. The intern program, all of it depends on how you intend to set up the employee. So first of all, if you're going to have that person working part-time, no benefits, less than 30 hours a week, typically our part-timers are 20, 24-ish hours a week, we would like them to be temporary part-time employees. That way, it's clearly outside of the expectations that are established in the code around employment agreements. Employment agreements are also what we refer to as contract employees because that's what we used to call them. So if you ever hear somebody referring to a position as a contractual employee, that's generally what they're speaking to. So the renaming to employment agreement, we had gone through an extensive audit of our membership in the Maryland State Retirement System, which further caused us to make some distinctions in our code so that it was clear that if a position that was under an employment agreement remains like into the 5th year of your fiscal years, that clearly you need that position more longer term and should be considering that for conversion by the 5th year as a civil service or exempt service, depending on where the position is. For us, civil service is our merit system, which means that's a competitive process in order to be hired into a civil service position. Exempt service is more at will, meaning that there's not an expectation that an individual has a long-term employment by an at will, that they won't have, if that position was eliminated or they were not continued, they'd be subject to fair employment regulations, but they would not be entitled to appeal a termination decision. So that's the primary distinction between civil service and exempt service. Both in city government, we consider to be full-time positions. And so when you're making decisions around funding and what to call a position, those are the primary distinctions we like to have used. We do not have a part-time civil service employment arrangement, so we don't have anything that graduates the cost of benefits, that graduates what leave people gets, that graduates any other terms or conditions of employment under civil service. So with the with the employment agreements, when we have an individual that's hired into a position, their initial agreement is the basis for which they were hired, and then subsequent years, if they continue into the next fiscal year and so on, those are renewal years. And so that's how we handle that administratively. That's how we address that practically in terms of restating their employment relationship with the city. Our part-time employees are eligible for one benefit that is a leave benefit, and that's under the Maryland Sick and Safe Leave. If a person works 12 hours a week or 24 hours a pay period, they are entitled to 1 hour for every 30 hours they work to a sick and safe leave benefit. And we follow the Maryland state law on that. It's something that calculates. We're all legally compliant with that. Our employment agreement employees are receiving their sick leave in the same manner. And then also under employment agreements, we provide holidays and annual leave as a benefit to them as well.
Can I just ask clarification? If so exempt versus non-exempt is just an FLSA code?
Yes,
That's an easy way
that's
to look
always
at it.
confusing to people. When I say exempt, and then we talk about the FLSA, the overtime exemption. So on the job description, it says FLSA. And so when it says non-exempt, that means they're subject to the overtime provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act. When it says exempt, it means that they are not entitled to overtime as provided by that law.
Okay.
Thank you. Sort of in conjunction with that, I understand that you are taking on the internship under your offices, not you specifically, maybe, I'm not sure. And there's a placeholder currently for that internship. And we were told in our previous that the interns that were hired beyond the 6-week, I believe, initial plan for the interns have been paid through a various either extra funds in a department that didn't have a full-time employee or whatnot. Do you believe that the amount that you're asking for this year, the 94,000 would
90,500.
Okay, 90,500
Yeah.
would cover situations such as this?
I'm not entirely sure yet. Last year we didn't know how many would be hired. We didn't know how much, how far the money would go. We made an estimate based on based on this year's experience, and then also based on what would be reasonable compensation, along with how many hours we expected to work. And we made an estimate of 12 weeks of employment, knowing that some would work longer, some would just come and work for us for the summer. I'm also trying to make some distinctions around what the departments can offer and what age groups they can actually engage that offering with. So there's a lot we're trying to do that incorporates elements of a program that we think will be good. We had a really good beginning, and it's just a matter of continuing that into a program that, based on experience, we need to make a few adjustments in.
Okay. And I do have a further question about the internship program. My business itself participated in an internship program. I had an intern last year from Baltimore University, and the process for that, and then there was an evaluation that I submitted. There was a report that I submitted at the end. Are we doing that with this internship program?
We will. We'll have. Clearly, what you want to know is, what do you want to get out of this program? Because this is about maybe in some cases like an early introduction or first introduction to working in city government, working in a municipal government, working in government at all, or maybe even working. And so it's a really strong desire that we have some elements in place so that there's a feedback loop that both from the individual and from the receiving department or whoever that person is spending time with to gain a real world experience out of this. So we would like very much to put in place some elements that are, resume creation or filling out an application and then actually introducing yourself and giving yourself an opportunity as a young person to say what you have to offer and to be received in that vein. In the HR world, you know what you go through for recruitment and selection. I don't intend to make any separation between the good work that's done in terms of community outreach and pulling in through connection those individuals that are best served by this kind of program. I mean, that's for the real work that's already being done and is done. And so my desire is just to be able to put in place those bones that got started. Everything is lessons learned, growth and development is all part of what we do as humans, right? So the desire is to build something that will be received and stay with an individual through this experience well beyond their time with us here. It's a good place if you have a need that you haven't quite figured out to take advantage of this program. I think departments are really busy. I mean, to take time out and to provide an opportunity of mentorship takes some structure, but also takes time. And in our city, takes space, which we don't have very much of at all.
Right.
And so I want to make sure what the departments have to offer, they have an opportunity to build that reasonably. And we have an opportunity to do some good matching. And we have especially a good opportunity to evaluate how well we did, both on the front end and on the back end.
Right. In most places, internship programs are somewhat of a venue or avenue towards employment in those. And I keep thinking back to our intern in the Office of Community Services, the 2 interns. If they were asked to reapply for this year, if their funding's going out, I see that it's sort of as a continuum, and I guess maybe it's not appropriate for this year since it is such a new program, but I'm almost thinking that we should be looking at that avenue for them. If they were substantial enough and doing the job that we needed to keep them as an intern, I would think that sort of a next step to keep that continuation of service without a break.
Can I, I'm confused. So we talked about those interns. I don't know if you heard during the OCS discussion and that their grant, were they grant?
The 2 interns were interns from last summer, from the internship program that we ran.
I think they took 2 as part of the program.
Okay, so in your 90,500, did you anticipate them coming back? Are they in the calculation?
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah,
Mike?
Madam Chair, Michael Malinoff, City Manager. As Ms. Hopkins mentioned earlier, we're not quite sure. We used funding roughly where we were last year, and we need to get into it a little bit more deeply. I know Tricia had a meeting on Friday with Will, and he's going to be coordinating it for the mayor's office. And we're in the process of, I think, figuring out the details, how many interns we can handle. And so the short answer is maybe it's enough,
Do they
but
work
we're not
8-hour
sure.
days? Are they 8-hour days?
No, the program was about 20 hours a week.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was about 20 hours a week. And so it's time. I mean, obviously, we're in the early stages of budget, but it's time for us to solicit feedback from the departments as to what opportunities they have, what job tasks they can be performing, what kind of end goals there are as part of this program. It is a great opportunity in some cases with appropriate age individuals in some departments that are handling. One example is, for the fire department, this is a great opportunity to expose somebody to what would be considered a junior firefighter role out in the volunteer world, but, within the confines of city government for an appropriate age individual, because they're going to could potentially be exposed to elements of the job that we would responsibly want to make sure somebody's not too young to have that experience. And we want to give the departments the opportunity to define what that might be, and then work with them to redefine or to edit those before then presenting them as opportunities through this program.
What was the number in your calculation of 90,000?
I think we're about 25.
So they're not about.
Yeah, so we had about.
It's not a long week duration.
No,
right?
so we had about 25 participants in the program for FY23, some of which stayed very short period of time.
Okay.
So we did it on an experience basis first and foremost, and then making sure too that, we have, 9 departments? Mm-hmm. Practically speaking, I would be looking at probably the greatest arrangement being with Recreation and Parks, with their programming, because they are better able to handle youth participation.
May I mention at this point, that was an idea that the new director suggested to us as a possibility for interns who are younger. We had one as young as 14-year-old last time. And so there may be positions within Recreation Parks that may be suitable. They'll have to do background checks if they're working with kids, but it at least gives them an opportunity that makes sense and is safe.
I know she wants to come say hello to me. So
she wants, she raised
it's
her
actually
hand.
even more than that we're working through developing because of Ms. Johnson's background, working in prior arrangements of really exciting ideas around participation for youth in something that will allow them to walk away some really great skill sets, but knowing that maybe it's together, and more of an interactive program that is built around what their needs are, because they're the ones between, right? They're the ones between being an enrollee in a camp and being maybe the leader of a camp or a member of that camp. So we don't want to fail to meet that need. We just want to be really careful about how we do it and do it with good information and good support from people who know what they're doing.
Okay. Are there any other questions on job description? Oh, you had a question on job description, didn't you?
I do have one question. I'm looking at 2 job descriptions. You sent us about 8 or 9 different ones. And one is Community Services Specialist, non-exempt, updated 12/14, job class 1508, pay grade 10. And the other one, same title, Community Services Specialist, grade 10, non-exempt, updated 2020, has no job class code.
Right, because that's the evergreen style. They don't have class codes on them.
So how do we differentiate? I mean,
so that one was
clearly
created in 2020. That one was created after we went through the part-time African-American focused and Hispanic focused services specialists.
So the one from 2014 is in the police department.
Correct.
The one from 2020
It's more
is
geared
in the
to the
mayor's
mayor's.
office, and you're saying that's the African-American liaison?
Yes. Yes. So
do we have a like job description for the Hispanic liaison when we created it?
yes.
So is that in the group that you sent us?
No, because that position's not filled right now.
It's what?
It's not filled. It's not an allocation in the mayor's office.
So that's the position that Ms. Gutierrez
Was
still
performing
maintains.
when she was there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my question, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, okay. Thank you so much. You know, we're tasked with some decisions, and it involves, you know, looking at all of the respective job descriptions and making sure that, you know, there's no duplication, et cetera. So thank you
Okay.
so much. And-
You're welcome.
Yeah. Oh, I did not see your hand, Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have two comments. And I might save this for the city council meeting as well, because I think it needs to be heard. First of all, we all have our responsibilities and our roles here in city government. And I'm going to go to this particular position, this deputy position that we've talked about many times. And I sent an email around to my colleagues. I don't think it went to you, Ms. Hopkins, but to the chief of staff and to the city manager. I did it twice. Because there was some sort of issue as to how this all came about. And as the public safety chair, I can only weigh in at the point at which I got involved. And as the public safety chair, I have a role too. And my role is to make sure that we look at all the positions in the city, but I'm particularly honed in sometimes on the public safety positions. And the word that keeps cropping up in conversations with me is that the process wasn't followed. And so I guess my next leap is that if the process isn't followed, are certain people blamed and punished? Because that's what I'm kind of getting out of all of this. And I made these comments at the city council meeting the last time. And I guess I may have to make them again. Because if anybody is going to be punished or blamed, then maybe it should be me, and I'll fall on the sword if necessary. Because if something is right and true, then it's right and true. And no one has told me yet that what I have explained in the email was not right and true, and how I got involved. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm frustrated. I was the one who asked the question about this position. It was not brought to my attention. I asked the question in a course of meetings, and that's all in there. And I can send you the email and have you take a look at it as well. So I just want to kind of make that clear, because I've heard that word process used a lot of times in conversations that I've had with certain leadership within the city and the administration, which leads me to believe that there's some sort of blame and punishment involved in all of this. So I'll leave it at that for now. But moving on, and we talked about the mayor's office and some positions and political and that sort of thing. And when a new administration comes in, they have their own kind of way in which they're going to do things and how things are going to be emphasized. So I don't know if it's ever come up or being asked or put out there if maybe some of these positions should be placed in the Office of Community Services. But I'm not asking for an answer at this point. I'm just kind of putting it out there as just kind of maybe an option, but I'm not saying that's the right option. But I'm just looking at the possible political landscape for the next administration, whatever and whoever that is. But that might be something that might be considered. But I'm just saying that it's just my 2 cents worth.
Thank you for that perspective, Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, let me think. So I think we covered everything on our agenda today, and we spoke about tomorrow. So if there's not anything else, do I have a motion to, do we have minute? We already did minutes, yeah. So I guess a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you.
I knew there was